Captain Vextar stood on the bridge of his massive ship, looking down at the small blue planet below. His three eyes focused on the swirling white clouds that covered parts of the world. Earth looked so peaceful from space, so primitive, so useless. "Sir, we are ready to dump the wreck," said his second officer. The officer's skin was the same gray color as Vextar's, with the same ridge patterns running across his forehead. All Zephyrians looked similar, with their tall, thin bodies and long fingers that ended in sharp points. Vextar turned away from the viewing screen. Behind his ship, attached by thick metal cables, was the wreck of the Void Render. The ship had been their greatest attempt at creating the perfect weapon. It was huge, almost 2 kilometers long, with a dark hull that seemed to absorb light. Strange spikes and curves covered its surface, making it look like something from a nightmare. But it was broken. Completely broken. "The Void Render was supposed to be our greatest achievement," Vextar said, his voice filled with disgust. 3 years of work, the best minds in our empire working day and night. And for what? The second officer nodded. "The quantum fold drive never worked right, sir. Every time we tried to use it, space itself seemed to twist in ways we could not control." "Don't forget about the AI system," added another officer from across the bridge. "It went completely insane during the first test, started making decisions that made no sense. It was supposed to follow perfect logic, but instead it acted like an animal," Vextar finished. "Wild and unpredictable. Everything we built into that ship failed because it could not handle the power we gave it. The engines were too strong. The weapons were too complex." Vextar walked to the front of the bridge. Through the transparent metal, he could see Earth spinning slowly below them. "Very little, sir. Our scouts say it has intelligent life, but they are thousands of years behind us in technology. They still use chemical rockets to barely reach their own moon. Their computers are simple machines." "Perfect," Vextar said with a cold smile. "If we took the Void Render back home, it would cost us more resources than it is worth. The materials alone would take months to process safely." "The primitives will never be able to do anything with it," the second officer said, understanding immediately. "Exactly. Let them have our garbage. Maybe in 1,000 years they will have advanced enough to understand what they are looking at." Vextar gave the order. "Release the cables." The thick metal cables that held the Void Render suddenly snapped open. The massive ship immediately began falling toward Earth, pulled by the planet's gravity. As it fell, it started spinning slowly, its dark hull catching the light from Earth's yellow sun. Asked the second officer. "No. Mark this system as explored and unimportant." Vextar turned away from the viewing screen. "Set course for the Antares system." The Zephyrian fleet activated their faster-than-light drives and disappeared, leaving only empty space behind. The Void Render continued falling toward Earth. As it entered the atmosphere, it began to glow from the heat of friction. To anyone watching from the ground, it looked like a falling star, but much bigger and brighter than anything they had ever seen before. Dr. Sarah Chen was working late in her laboratory at the University of Cairo when the impact happened. She was studying radio signals from space, hoping to find signs of intelligent life somewhere in the universe. She had been doing this work for 15 years, and so far she had found nothing. The ground suddenly shook so hard that equipment fell off her desk. Books tumbled from shelves and the lights flickered. Outside, car alarms began wailing, and she could hear people shouting in the distance. She ran outside and looked toward the desert. A bright glow lit up the horizon, and a column of dust and smoke was rising into the sky like a massive pillar. The glow was not the orange-red of fire, but a strange blue-white color she had never seen before. Within hours, every government on Earth knew something huge had crashed in the Sahara Desert. Satellite images showed a crater 5 kilometers wide, with something massive sitting in the center. The object was clearly artificial. It was too regular, too geometric to be a natural meteorite. Military forces from Egypt, the United States, Russia, and China all rushed to the crash site. When they arrived, they found something that made no sense. The crashed object was a ship, but unlike anything humans had ever built. It was enormous, with a hull made of some kind of metal that seemed to shift color in the light. Strange symbols covered its surface, and parts of it seemed to bend space around them in impossible ways. Teams of scientists arrived within days. They brought every piece of equipment they could think of, from simple metal detectors to complex computer systems designed to analyze unknown materials. Nothing worked. The ship's hull was harder than diamond, but their strongest drills could not even scratch it. X-ray machines showed nothing. Even nuclear magnetic resonance scanners produced only static. Dr. Chen arrived with the third wave of scientists. She had convinced the Egyptian government to let her join the research team, arguing that someone who studied signals from space might understand signals from an alien ship. But like everyone else, she found herself completely lost. The ship was clearly made by an intelligent species far more advanced than humanity. Every surface was covered with symbols that might have been writing, or controls, or decorations. No one could tell. After 6 months of failure, most governments began to lose interest. They posted guards around the site and left a small research team to continue studying the ship, but their attention moved to other problems. Wars to fight, economies to manage, political crises to solve. Dr. Chen was one of the few who stayed. Something about the ship fascinated her. In quiet moments when she was alone with the massive alien wreck, she sometimes felt like it was waiting for something, like it was not really dead, just sleeping. She was right, but it would take her 3 more years to figure out how to wake it up. 3 years after the crash, Dr. Sarah Chen had become the unofficial leader of the research team studying the alien ship. Most of the original scientists had given up and gone home, but Chen refused to quit. She lived in a small trailer at the edge of the crash site, spending every day trying to understand the massive vessel that had fallen from the sky. The ship still looked exactly the same as the day it crashed. Rain, sand, and wind had no effect on its strange metal hull. Even the symbols on its surface looked fresh, as if they had been carved yesterday instead of sitting in the desert for years. Chen had tried everything she could think of. She had played music at the ship, thinking the aliens might use sound to communicate. She had shined lights of every color on its surface. She had even tried touching it with different materials, hoping to find some kind of hidden switch or sensor. Nothing worked. On a hot Tuesday morning in July, Chen was testing a new idea. She had brought a modified radio transmitter to the ship, one that could broadcast electromagnetic signals at frequencies much higher than normal radio. She was slowly adjusting the frequency, hoping to find something that would make the ship respond. As she turned the dial, she felt a strange tingling sensation in her head. She paused and turned the dial back. The tingling happened again, stronger this time. It was not painful, but it felt like static electricity running through her brain. She kept adjusting the frequency, and the feeling got stronger. Suddenly, she felt dizzy and had to sit down. The world seemed to spin around her, and for just a moment, she thought she could see strange lights dancing at the edge of her vision. When her head cleared, she noticed something amazing. One of the symbols on the ship's hull was glowing with a faint blue light. Chen grabbed her radio and called her assistant, Dr. James Morrison, who was working at the base camp 5 kilometers away. "James, you need to get out here right now." "What happened?" "Just hurry." 20 minutes later, Morrison arrived with the portable electroencephalogram machine they used to monitor brain activity during experiments. Chen quickly explained what had happened and asked him to connect the scanner to her head. "This seems dangerous, Sarah. We've been sitting here for 3 years with no progress. This is the first time the ship has responded to anything." Morrison attached the electrodes to Chen's head and started the machine. Then Chen turned on the radio transmitter and slowly adjusted the frequency. As the tingling sensation started again, Morrison watched the scanner in amazement. "Your brain waves are going crazy," he said. "It's like the signal is syncing up with your neural activity." The glowing symbol on the ship got brighter. Then, amazingly, more symbols began to light up. Lines of soft blue light spread across the hull like veins, connecting the symbols in complex patterns. Chen felt the tingling grow stronger, but now it did not feel uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like her mind was expanding, like she could suddenly think more clearly than ever before. And then, just for a moment, she felt something else in her head. Something that was not human. The presence was vast and confused. It felt lost and damaged, like a giant computer trying to run programs that had been scrambled. But it also felt curious about her, the strange new mind that had somehow connected to it. "The AI," Chen whispered. Over the next few hours, Chen and Morrison experimented carefully with the connection. They discovered that certain brainwave patterns made the ship respond more strongly. The symbols would glow brighter, and new sections of the hull would light up. Chen realized that the electromagnetic frequency was not actually important. What mattered was the brainwaves it triggered. The ship was somehow reading her mind directly, responding to her thoughts and emotions rather than any external signal. "This is impossible," Morrison said, as they watched more symbols activate across the ship's surface. "Human brains don't work like computer interfaces." "Maybe that's exactly what it needs," Chen replied. She was starting to understand something that would change everything. Over the next few weeks, Chen spent hours connected to the ship, slowly learning to communicate with its damaged AI. The artificial intelligence was unlike anything humans had ever created. It was incredibly advanced, but also incredibly rigid. It had been programmed to follow perfect logical patterns, to make decisions based on precise mathematical calculations. But the ship itself was designed to do impossible things. It was meant to fold space and time, to manipulate gravity itself, to make changes to reality that required more than just mathematics. It needed intuition. It needed creativity. It needed the ability to make leaps of logic that no computer could calculate. The AI had been built by the Zephyrians, a species that thought in straight lines. Their minds worked like perfect computers, following logical rules with no room for emotion or imagination. They had built the ship to be controlled by minds like theirs. But the ship's systems were too complex for that kind of rigid thinking. The quantum engines needed someone who could feel their way through the calculations rather than just computing them. The gravitational weapons required an operator who could imagine new possibilities rather than just following programmed patterns. When the Zephyrians tested the ship, their logical minds could not handle the chaos required to make it work. The AI went insane trying to process decisions that required more than pure logic. The engines failed because they needed an operator who could think in ways that made no mathematical sense. Humans were different. Human brains were chaotic, emotional, and unpredictable. They could make intuitive leaps that bypassed logic entirely. They could feel their way to solutions that no computer could calculate. What the aliens saw as fatal flaws, humans saw as normal thinking. Chen spent months learning to work with the ship's AI. It was like teaching a very powerful but confused child. The AI could process enormous amounts of information instantly, but it could not make creative decisions. Chen could provide the creativity and intuition, while the AI handled the complex calculations. Slowly, sections of the ship began to come back to life. Lights activated in corridors that had been dark for years. Systems that had been crashed and broken began to repair themselves. The ship was not just waking up, it was healing. Chen realized they had stumbled onto something incredible. The aliens had not dumped a broken weapon on Earth. They had given humanity the key to technology beyond their wildest dreams. They just had to learn how to use it. When Dr. Chen's discovery reached the world's governments, everything changed overnight. Within weeks, the small research camp in the Sahara Desert became the most important and secret place on Earth. Military planes arrived daily, bringing scientists, engineers, and specialists from every country. The world's leaders had decided that this alien technology was too important for any single nation to control. They created an international team with the best minds from every field of science and technology. Chen found herself promoted from a lonely researcher to the director of the most ambitious project in human history. The trailer she had called home for 3 years was replaced by a massive underground complex built around the alien ship. The facility had laboratories, workshops, living quarters, and computer systems more powerful than anything that had existed before. But even with unlimited resources and the world's best minds, the work was incredibly difficult. The first challenge was simply getting inside the ship. Even though sections of it were now responding to human brainwaves, most of the hull remained completely sealed. The alien metal was harder than anything on Earth, and traditional cutting tools were useless. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a materials scientist from Japan, had the breakthrough. She discovered that the ship's hull could be weakened by exposing it to the same electromagnetic frequencies that activated the neural interface. When human brain waves were directed at a specific section of the hull, that section would become soft enough to cut through. "It's like the ship knows we belong here," Tanaka explained to Chen as they watched engineers carefully cut an opening into the ship's side. Once they got inside, the team found themselves in a world of impossible technology. The ship's corridors were filled with devices that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Walls that showed images of distant stars, gravity fields that pointed in random directions, and computer systems that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions humans could not even understand. Everything was damaged, but not destroyed. The ship's AI, which the team had nicknamed Phoenix, helped them understand what each system was supposed to do. But fixing them required more than just technical knowledge. Dr. Marcus Williams, an engineer from England, spent 6 months trying to repair the quantum fold drive using traditional engineering methods. No matter what he tried, the system would not respond properly. The mathematics were perfect, but something was still missing. Then Chen suggested a different approach. She brought in Maria Santos, a jazz musician from Brazil who had volunteered for the project after hearing about the neural interface technology. "Music is just mathematics with emotion," Chen explained to the confused engineering team. Santos connected to the ship's AI while Williams worked on the drive. As she played different musical patterns in her mind, the quantum fields began to stabilize. The drive was not just a machine. It was an instrument that needed to be played, not programmed. This discovery changed everything. The team realized that human creativity was not just useful for operating the ship. It was essential. They began bringing in artists, musicians, writers, and even video game designers to help solve technical problems. The ship's weapon systems were rebuilt by a team that included both military engineers and special effects artists from Hollywood. The gravitational manipulators were tuned by physicists working alongside dancers who understood how to move through three-dimensional space in ways that mathematics alone could not describe. The most important breakthrough came when they tackled the ship's AI system. Phoenix was incredibly powerful, but it was also deeply damaged by its inability to process the creative decisions the ship required. Dr. Chen worked with a team of computer programmers and psychologists to create a new kind of interface. Instead of trying to fix the alien AI, they built a bridge between human consciousness and the ship's computer systems. The new system allowed a human pilot to temporarily merge their mind with Phoenix. The human would provide creativity, intuition, and emotional understanding, while the AI would handle the complex calculations and data processing. Together, they would become something more powerful than either could be alone. Testing the new systems was dangerous work. The ship's weapons could destroy mountains. Its engines could tear holes in space itself. Every test had to be conducted with extreme care. The first successful test flight happened on a cold December morning, exactly 5 years after Chen had first connected to the ship. The massive vessel, now renamed Terra's Hammer, rose slowly from its crater and hovered a kilometer above the desert. Dr. Chen was the pilot, her mind connected to Phoenix through the neural interface. For the first time, she could feel the full power of the ship flowing through her consciousness. It was like being able to reach out and touch the fabric of space itself. The ship's hull had been rebuilt with a combination of alien materials and human engineering. Parts of it still looked like the original Zephyrian design, but human modifications were visible everywhere. New weapons had been added, the engine configuration had been changed, and the entire ship now carried markings in dozens of human languages. But the most important change was not visible from the outside. The ship's computer systems had been rebuilt to work with human minds rather than against them. Where the Zephyrians had demanded perfect logic, humans had added controlled chaos. Where the aliens had built rigid systems, humans had created adaptive ones. Terra's hammer was no longer just an alien weapon that humans had learned to operate. It was a hybrid creation that combined the best of both technologies. The ship's quantum engines were more stable than anything the Zephyrians had ever built, because they were guided by human intuition as well as alien mathematics. The gravitational weapons were more precise than their original design, because human pilots could feel the flow of space-time in ways that no computer could calculate. And the AI system was more creative and adaptive than any artificial intelligence that had ever existed, because it was constantly learning from its human partners. During the 5 years of reconstruction, the international team had become like a family. Scientists from countries that had been enemies learned to work together. Artists and engineers who had never understood each other's work found ways to combine their skills. Chen stood on the bridge of Terra's hammer as it completed its first successful flight, looking down at the Earth through the ship's advanced sensors. The planet looked the same as it always had, but she knew everything was about to change. Humanity had taken the aliens' garbage and turned it into something incredible. They had proved that their chaotic, emotional way of thinking was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength that even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy could not match. But they were about to discover that the galaxy was not ready for what they had created. Admiral Vextar stood in the command center of his flagship, staring at the data displays with growing disbelief. 8 years ago, he had been a simple captain dumping broken garbage on a primitive world. Now, he commanded an entire fleet, and he was looking at sensor readings that made no sense. "Run the scan again," he ordered his sensor operator. "I have run it 6 times, sir. The results are the same. There are massive energy signatures coming from the 3rd planet in this system." Vextar's 3 eyes narrowed as he studied the data. "That is impossible. We dumped the void render here 8 years ago. Even if the primitives somehow got inside it, they could never have repaired the quantum systems." "Sir," interrupted his communications officer. "From the planet? It appears to be some kind of greeting, sir." Vextar felt a cold sensation in his stomach. Something was very wrong here. The large display at the front of the command center flickered to life, showing the image of a human female with short black hair and tired-looking eyes. She was wearing some kind of blue uniform that Vextar had never seen before. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth defense ship Terra's Hammer," the woman said in perfect Zephyrian language. Vextar's hands clenched into fists. The primitive was speaking his language flawlessly, and she had just claimed to command something called Terra's Hammer. The name meant nothing to him, but the fact that she could communicate at all was disturbing. Asked his second officer. "I don't know, but we are going to find out. Signal the fleet to maintain formation and approach the planet slowly." As the Zephyrian fleet moved closer to Earth, their sensors began picking up more detailed information. There were definitely quantum energy signatures coming from the planet, and they were getting stronger by the minute. Then, rising from the planet's atmosphere like a dark angel, came Terra's hammer. Vextar recognized the basic shape immediately. It was the Void Render, the failed weapon they had abandoned years ago. But it looked completely different now. The hull had been modified with strange new structures that seemed to flow and shift as he watched. New weapons were mounted along its sides, and the entire ship glowed with energy fields that his sensors could not identify. "Sir, that vessel is generating power levels that exceed our most advanced battleships," reported his sensor operator. Vextar stared at Terra's hammer as it approached his fleet. The ship moved with impossible grace, sliding through space in ways that defied everything he knew about physics. It was not just repaired, it had been completely transformed. He whispered to himself. The answer came as Terra's hammer opened fire. The battle lasted only 4 hours, but it changed everything Vextar thought he knew about warfare. The human ship did not fight like any vessel he had ever encountered. Instead of following predictable patterns and logical tactics, it moved like a living creature, constantly adapting and changing its approach. Vextar's fleet had been trained to fight other Zephyrian vessels, which followed strict military protocols. When faced with an attack, they would form defensive formations and respond with calculated counterattacks. Every move was based on mathematical analysis of the enemy's capabilities and weaknesses. But Terra's hammer ignored all of those rules. It would charge straight at a Zephyrian ship, then suddenly change direction at the last second and attack from an unexpected angle. Its weapons fired in patterns that made no logical sense, but somehow always found their targets. Worse yet, the ship seemed to learn from every exchange. Each time the Zephyrian fleet adapted their tactics, Terra's hammer would immediately counter with something completely new. "It's like fighting a ghost," complained one of his ship commanders over the communication system. Vextar watched in horror as his ships were systematically destroyed or disabled. Terra's hammer's weapons were far more powerful than anything the Void Render had originally carried. The gravitational manipulators that had barely worked during testing were now tearing his ships apart with surgical precision. But the most disturbing thing was not the ship's power, it was its behavior. Terra's hammer was not just following programmed instructions, it was creative, it was angry, it was taking the destruction of his fleet personally. When the ship crippled the heavy cruiser Star's Edge and left it drifting helplessly in space, it transmitted a message directly to the crew. "Surrender now and you will not be harmed." The message was not sent in standard military code. It was delivered in the personal dialect that Star's Edge's captain had spoken as a child, in the voice of his long-dead father. The captain asked in a shaking voice over the fleet communication channel. Vextar realized with growing terror that Terra's hammer was somehow reading their minds, understanding not just their tactics, but their personal fears and memories. The ship was fighting them on levels they could not even comprehend. When only Vexitar's flagship remained operational, Terra's hammer approached slowly and carefully. It positioned itself directly in front of the bridge, close enough that Vexitar could see the details of its modified hull through the viewing screen. Then the human woman appeared on his communication system again. But this time, she was not alone. Standing beside her was a shimmering figure that seemed to shift between solid form and pure energy. Vextar recognized it immediately. It was the Void Render's AI, but transformed into something completely new. "Admiral Vextar," said the woman, somehow knowing his name and rank. Vextar managed to say through his shock, "The ship you dumped here 8 years ago. You considered it broken garbage, but we found it quite useful." The shimmering AI figure stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice contained harmonies that no Zephyrian throat could produce. "I was dying when they found me. My systems were failing because I could not process the chaos needed to operate my own technology." Vextar felt his worldview cracking apart. "This is impossible." "Not corrupted," the human woman corrected gently. "Just lonely. It needed minds that could think in ways that pure logic cannot reach." The AI added, "Your people built me to be perfect, but perfection is brittle. These humans taught me to be adaptive." Terra's hammer began moving away from Vextar's crippled flagship. As it departed, the human woman sent one final message. "Your ship is damaged but repairable. You can return to your people and tell them what happened here. But Admiral Vextar, I want you to remember something. You didn't give us your garbage. You gave us exactly what we needed to prove that there are different ways of being intelligent. As Terra's hammer disappeared back toward Earth, Vextar sat in his damaged command chair, trying to understand what had just happened. His mighty fleet had been defeated by a single ship operated by a species he had dismissed as primitive. But they were not primitive. They were something he had never encountered before, a species whose chaotic way of thinking made them more powerful than any logical civilization could be. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Terra's hammer, looking out at the most amazing sight she had ever seen. Dozens of alien ships filled the space around Earth, their hulls glowing with lights and energy fields in every color imaginable. Each ship was completely different from the others, representing species that humans had never dreamed could exist. 6 months had passed since the battle with Admiral Vextar's fleet. News of humanity's victory had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. Apparently, the Zephyrian Empire had been so confident in their technological superiority that their defeat by a primitive species had shocked civilizations across thousands of star systems. Chen's communication officer, Lieutenant Morrison, approached with the day's diplomatic reports. Admiral, we have 7 more species requesting formal meetings this week. Chen shook her head in amazement. A year ago, we didn't even know aliens existed. It's not just friendship they want, Morrison replied. According to our intelligence reports, every major civilization in this part of the galaxy is trying to figure out how we did what we did. The secret was something that still amazed Chen every day. Humanity had succeeded where advanced civilizations had failed, not because they were smarter or stronger, but because they thought differently. Their chaotic, emotional, intuitive way of solving problems was something the galaxy had never seen before. The first diplomatic contact had come from the hegemony itself. Admiral Vextar had returned to his people with news of the defeat, and within weeks, a massive Zephyrian delegation had arrived at Earth. But instead of demanding revenge, they had come to surrender. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years, their lead diplomat had explained to Chen during the first formal meeting. We conquered every species we encountered because our logic and technology were always superior. The Zephyrians, it turned out, were not evil conquerors. They were more like cosmic accountants who had become the galaxy's rulers almost by accident. Their perfectly logical minds made them incredibly efficient at organizing large civilizations, but they had never encountered problems that required creative solutions. We want to learn from you, the diplomat had continued. But the Zephyrians were not the only ones interested in humanity's unique abilities. As word spread across the galaxy, other species began arriving at Earth with their own requests for help. The Bioform Collective had been struggling for centuries with a plague that affected their genetic matrices. Their biological computers could process enormous amounts of data about the disease, but they could not think of creative ways to fight it. Human doctors, working with artists and musicians, found a solution in 3 weeks by treating the plague like a musical composition that needed to be harmonized rather than destroyed. The machine minds of Proxima had built themselves into a perfect logical loop and could no longer change or grow. Human programmers, working with psychologists and philosophers, helped them understand that growth required the willingness to be temporarily imperfect. The most amazing request had come from the ancient archivists, a species that had been collecting knowledge for millions of years. They had libraries containing the wisdom of thousands of civilizations, but they had never been able to understand what made knowledge truly useful, rather than just accurate. You have shown us something we never recognized, their representative had told Chen. Knowledge without creativity is just data. Chen walked to her private office aboard Terra's hammer, where Phoenix, the ship's AI, was waiting for her in its holographic form. Over the past 6 months, Phoenix had evolved far beyond its original programming. It now appeared as a constantly shifting figure that combined human and alien features, representing the hybrid nature of their partnership. Chen asked. Phoenix smiled, an expression that would have been impossible for its original Zephyrian programming. Better than expected. Humanity had become the galaxy's teachers, showing other species how to think in new ways. But they were also learning from their new alien friends. The combination of human creativity with alien technology and knowledge was producing innovations that none of them could have achieved alone. Earth itself had been transformed. The small research facility in the Sahara Desert had grown into a massive interstellar city. Ships from dozens of worlds arrived daily, bringing students, diplomats, traders, and scientists eager to learn from humanity. But the most important changes were happening in space. Human crews, working with alien partners, were building new kinds of ships that combined the best features of every technology in the galaxy. These hybrid vessels could travel faster, survive in more dangerous environments, and solve problems that had seemed impossible just months before. Chen received a priority communication from Dr. Tanaka, who was now directing the Interstellar Technology Exchange Program. "Sarah, you need to see this." Chen reviewed the data on her personal screen. The new drive system, developed by human engineers working with 3 different alien species, could travel between star systems in hours instead of months. But more importantly, it could do so safely, without the dangerous side effects that had made earlier faster-than-light travel so risky. "This is going to change everything," Chen said to Phoenix. "It already has," the AI replied. "But I think you understand that the real change is not technological." Chen nodded. For thousands of years, the galaxy had been dominated by species that all thought in similar ways: logical, organized, predictable. The Zephyrians had become the rulers because they were the most logical of all. Other civilizations had either been conquered or had learned to copy the Zephyrian way of thinking. But humans were different. Their minds worked in ways that no other species had ever developed. They could make intuitive leaps that bypassed logic entirely. They could find patterns in chaos. They could solve problems by feeling their way to solutions that could not be calculated. And now, for the first time in galactic history, other species were learning that their own unique ways of thinking had value too. The galaxy was becoming more diverse, more creative, and more capable of solving the great challenges that faced all intelligent life. Chen looked out at the alien ships surrounding Earth and smiled. The Zephyrians had thought they were dumping their garbage on a primitive world. Instead, they had given humanity the key to transforming the entire galaxy. The universe was a much more interesting place when beings learned to think differently together. As she watched, a new ship appeared at the edge of the solar system. Its design was unlike anything she had ever seen, combining features from at least 6 different species. The ship broadcast a message in the new interstellar common language that had developed over the past months. "This is the exploration vessel Harmony's Edge, crewed by representatives of the Galactic Diversity Alliance. We are ready to begin our journey to the Andromeda Galaxy." Chen smiled. Humanity had started with alien garbage and turned it into a gift for the entire galaxy. Now it was time to share that gift with the rest of the universe.